Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Artist Talk. My name is Rebecca Leopoldina Torres, and I'm currently serving as the president of the Monotype Guild in New England. And I will also be serving as the moderator for our Q&A later on. On behalf of the Guild, I want to thank you for joining us tonight for Monotypes in Motion. Like all of you, I am looking forward to tonight's discussion that explores the intersection between stop motion animation and monotype prints. Now we have artists joining us from all over the US and beyond today. So if you get a moment, please feel free to drop into the chat where you're joining us from. I know we have artists joining us from Canada, from Montreal, from California. So we're so excited that you can be here tonight. As the Monotype Guild is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I'd like to begin today by respectfully acknowledging the indigenous cultures of New England. I join you from the ancestral homeland of the Massachusetts people and the Wampanoag tribe. I would like to recognize them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. This land is a place that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. And so in that tradition, we look forward to our meeting and exchange with you all tonight. For those of you not familiar with the Monotype Guild in New England, we are a volunteer-run nonprofit printmaking organization consisting of over 250 contemporary artists creating unique impressions by working in the medium of monotype and monoprints. We are open to all members, and none of our board members or volunteers are paid. So all the amazing work that we do, including our exhibitions and our free virtual program, like today's Artist Talk, is purely a labor of love and is funded primarily by our membership dues, donations, and submission fees for exhibitions. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank our members and volunteers who continue to donate their time and work tirelessly to keep this organization not only running, but growing and thriving. While our current exhibitions are on hold for the time being, we have a wide range of upcoming artist talks, artist meetups, town halls, etc. scheduled for this winter. So please go to our website at mgne.org for more information. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the printmakers who will be joining us tonight to discuss their collaboration and making the two stop animation videos titled The Long Journey Home in 2018 and Nested World in 2019. Our first artist, Susan Rostow, is a Brooklyn-based multimedia artist who works with printmaking, sculptural books, and animation. In addition to Susan's active career as an artist, she's an innovative inventor of printmaking methods and materials and is best known as the creator of Akua inks, which many of us printmakers, including myself, can't live without. Phyllis and Victor Merriam are the dynamic duo also known as the postdigitalprintmaker. Together, they investigate the synergy between technology and traditional printmaking. Their blog features the work of artists that incorporate technology into their traditional printmaking practices and have curated several gallery exhibitions and written articles related to this topic. Our final artist, Beth Fein, is based in California. Her practice encompasses printmaking, performance, sculpture, and installation. She continually explores the transient nature of movement, and she integrates performance and visual art into her work. It is equal parts conceptual, material, chance, and choice. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan to introduce our first animated film of the evening. Susan?
Thank you, Becca, and thank you everyone for being here. So the two videos we're about to show were created at two different international art events. The participants signed up ahead of time. There was no animation or printmaking experience required to participate. And we just went ahead and signed up everybody without any prior knowledge to who they were, and we're very happy to meet everybody and work with everyone at the time. So we started with a monotype plate, which served as the basis for all the artists' contributions. There are no limitations or no instructions, only that each artist started with what was left from the previous artist. We used Akua ink on plastic, and because Akua ink does not dry on plastic, we had 3 days of nonstop printmaking and animation. Each artist had 30 minutes to work, And every second I snapped a photo, they had to move their hand aside and stop, go for 30 minutes of art making. And so we wound up with about 200 to 300 images per artist. And then that led to about 3,000 frames for a 4-minute video. So after we watched the first 4-minute video, Long Journey Home, we'll get back together again to show some slides and discuss. So with Beth, Phyllis, and Victor, we'll all discuss some of the screenshots and also photos that were taken at the event. And then after we have that discussion, we'll get back to seeing the second video, Nested World. And after we see Nested World, we'll have a little studio setup visit, and I can show you how I have my studio set up for doing the stop motion animation in my print shop. So, and then after that, we'll have a moment for questions and answers. So let's see Long Journey Home now. that was wonderful. I never get tired of seeing that video, and I love it. I want to give a shout out to Christina Pumo, who wrote the story. And that story was written after we came back from doing the actual animation. And Ruth Antridge for the awesome music, which really brings it to life. And next slide, please. Hello? Oh. Okay, so next slide, please. Long Journey Home. We did this at Print Fest in 2018 at a fair hosted by the International Print Center in New York. And next slide, please. And I'm going to ask Victor if he would pop in now and talk about the 3D plate that we were working with, which is on the top left-hand corner.
Hi, we're Phyllis and Victor Merriam. I'm just going to say that we collaborate as the Post-Digital Printmaker. Some of you might be our followers, and we follow some of you, I'm sure, because every time we go to a fair, we meet a lot of people who I know by their Instagram names. We collaborate as on all of our work. Victor is more tech heavy, and I do more of the color and some of the design. And the artists that we blog about all do some digital component, some emerging technology combined with traditional printmaking. So now I'm going to turn this over to Victor to describe how we came to make these plates for Susan and what was involved. Victor?
Mm-hmm. So in the upper left-hand corner, you see the white plates that we started with. These plates are made in a 3D printer. We use 3D printmaking a lot in the printmaking that we do. We use 3D modeling software combined with photos to be able to get these plates. And we wrote an article about this in Printmaking today, and it's online, and we're providing a link to that article where we discuss in general how that process works. Yeah. So initially, we start with an image. Susan provided us with a black and white image. And in working with Susan, we decided that since this was an animation, one of the cool things about this technology is you can make the plates any shape that you want. So we took the image and we broke it up into puzzle pieces so that we can move them around during the animation. So we gave that to Susan, and she followed through with all the other images in terms of how she inked them, and she can describe those. They can be inked both as relief or intaglio. So Susan kind of went to town with them.
So the top plate was inked as intaglio and on the right, and the bottom plate was inked as relief. And on the left, it was inked as intaglio, but I also added a monotype plate on top of it. So there was a monotype plate layered on top and on the left, and then on the right, there was a monotype plate layered on the bottom of the pieces. Next. So you can see, I try to work the same with animation the same way as I would create a monotype and print it on the press, except it never gets printed. So I do like layering plates and images with transparency. So on these, you could see how I layered the monotype plate on top of the 3D plates, used a lot of transparent base, moved the ink around as if it were a reductive monotype using rags and wiping away so I could create the illusion of a storm happening. Next. And you can see here, this is the monotype plate on the bottom. I moved around the pieces, and I'm preparing to clean up the plate so the next artist can use the plate. Next. So here's the transition from finalizing my segment. So in here, you can see how I fade. In a similar way, you might fade to black, or in this case, it would be fade to gray, so that the artist has my residue on the plate so that they can begin their piece. Next. So here we are at IPCNY, and I think Phyllis can talk to you about her perspective as the artist participating, and I was on the other side saying click, click, you know, and stop so that I could take a picture of each mark she was making. Phyllis, you want to weigh in now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this was the first one that we did. And frankly, even though we made the plates and we met with Susan, we had no idea what to expect. So when we came to PrintFest, we realized that this was really real time. So what we had, but we came prepared with all sorts of things we had cut out of Yupo and things that we had fabricated on the 3D printer, but we weren't sure what we were going to do. But once we started, it sort of made sense to us. So we used Yupo. Well, go to the next slide because I think it'll be easier to see what I'm talking about. Yeah, you can see in Victor's hand, he's holding a Yupo. This is a piece of Yupo that has holes in it. So we cut out like little birds. So we could use it as a stencil or just use it as a shape. So we took the ink and we made some marks on the black ink. And then we would throw down these pieces of Yupo and go to the next slide. And you could see the black that we're stenciling through. So we're laying down the Yupo, putting ink through it. Then when we pick up, go to the next slide so that you can see that closer. And you can see what we're using. We're using Q-tips and we're using things like that just to move the ink around. Go to the next slide. And here you see the black marks are where we stenciled through the Yupo. But you see this white, this is 3D printed birds that we had printed. And the white birds are little pieces of Yupo that were cut out from, that we used the stencils to make the black, the white were the little pieces. So we were throwing pieces down and picking pieces up throughout the whole process. So this went on, we would pick up, put down, pick up, put down. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, you see the white is the actual form and we liked it. We made these organic forms. We thought they would look cool in the stencil. And then on the right side, you see we colored some of the, we cut some of the 3D printed elements. We painted them black and some we painted gold to give some variation. So we wiped through the plate. So that's essentially what we did. And you saw that piece come in, and when it goes quickly, it looks really interesting. Go to the next slide. Okay.
So you can see how each artist really brought in their unique styles and their methods. And so Deb and Glenn went for a traditional reductive monotype where the entire plate was inked up and then with a Q-tip drew into the surface and then kept changing it and making the movement by the changing the design itself. Next, please. And Nina brought with her a photograph and she combined the monotype with the photograph and moved the elements around together. Next, please. And same with Lauren. It was wonderful that Lauren brought a bit of color. He brought a photograph that had some color and moved it around. And that was a really nice addition because this was our first project and I wanted to keep it simple. So we had a limited palette of 2 blacks and like maybe a brown or so. Next, please. And Esther, she was really worked very spontaneously. And this was interesting because she brought in, we were originally using the intaglio ink, the thick ink, and then she brought in the liquid pigment and blending medium, which loosens the ink. So we had some really fun viscosity action going here where it caused some beading and resists. And I thought it was really playful. Next, please. And same with Maddie. Maddie went with the reductive and additive process, going back and forth, and it was really a beautiful, spontaneous way of working. Next, please. Now, Jim came in right after Maddie, and you could see on the back, on the background, a little bit of the residue that was left of that spiral in Maddie's. So it was sort of like it was a ghost print of Maddie, and then Jim worked on top of it. So he did additive on top of Maddie's ghost plate. Okay, next, please. So Nested World is our next video, and this was done in Texas. Excuse me, in Texas at the Southern Graphics International Printmaking Conference in 2019. And so we're going to show you this video. It's also about 4 minutes. And then, oh no, I'm sorry. We're not going to show. We're going to keep going. We'll show after we show some of the slides. This will give you an idea. So next, please. So this was the plate that was used. Again, Victor made a 3D plate, and on the right is the image that the plate was created from. Next, please. Okay, so I did something a little different this time. Instead of using the monotype plate with the 3D plates, I used monotype prints. Next, please. So here you can see some frames that I did, some shots from the frame. I used the monotype prints and cut them down and then moved them around and placed the 3D plates, which had the ink on it that I couldn't manipulate the ink, and form the animation with the movement of the plastic plates on top of the paper prints. Next, please.
Okay, I'm just gonna since we made the plates, we really knew what to expect and we really had time to plan. So what we did was we decided that we were going to slowly open the two halves of the earth slowly. First, we were going to wipe the plate to look almost like, what would you say, Victor?
Just like the universe behind the earth.
So we wiped the plate and then we slowly opened the earth, and we had these shapes cut of Yupo that we had painted yellows and oranges, and we let them come out slowly. And that was what we did for this. So go to the next slide. Yeah, so you could see that we started to wipe it, and you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and you could see that there was some trouble with light reflecting. That's why you see that red above that, just to keep the light out. And you see we're slowly opening the earth, and you see how it almost looks like the atmosphere. Keep going. Yeah, so here you see we're just starting to open the earth. Keep going. Yeah, and these are the shapes that we had to stars and spirals and different colors that we were going to show. And you'll see that when we show the video. You can go to the next slide. Okay, that's Beth.
I had to unmute myself. Well, I came to SGC. I told Susan I would do this project, but I had no idea what it was. So I think the day of or the day before, I asked her, well, what should I bring? And she just said, bring some cutout paper. So these are cut out. These are from postcards of my work. And I think the orange I must have added with some kind of marker. And then I just went in and played, and I love collaboration, and I love improvisation. So if you go to the next slide, you can see me enjoying myself. Had no idea what I was going to do, but I actually took the same little shapes and started to move them around on the plate. Next. And here you can just see it's very subtle, but you'll see in the video that I started turning and moving things. And I really enjoyed it. 30 minutes wasn't enough for me. I wanted to stay longer. So I'm hoping Susan's going to do another one that I get to participate in. It was really great. Next.
So thanks, Beth. So you can see that every artist made a unique contribution. And I really enjoyed that. This one we did add color, feeling a little more confident. I allowed a few more colors and widened the palette. So next, please. And you could see people used additive and reductive processes in the same manner as they did for the first long journey home. And if you look at Raul Lucas, you'll see an eye in the center. I don't want to be a spoiler when we watch the video next, but you'll see, keep your eye on the eye when you see that video, because you're going to see some action going on and how she used that in an animated way. Next, please. And Gail Ayers came in with, she came in from Oklahoma, and she brought some bumblebees, or little bees, insects that she placed on top of her monotype plate, and they moved around, and she really created a lot of movement with that. Next, please. And the horn-toed prints, that was a print shop. That is a print shop in Texas, and 3 guys from there, Manuel, Rule, and Francisco, came and they worked together. They shared the 30-minute session together, and it was wonderful watching them bounce back and forth, because one made a mark and then the other came in, and then the other one went back and forth with each other. So it was really wonderful watching them. And then Andrew used, I think he had some wax paper, and he just kept tearing wax paper, inking it up and moving them around. And you'll see the wonderful effects that that created in Nested World towards the end. Okay, I think we are ready to see Nested World.
Nested World. A point of intersection, collaboration, and exchange with 20 different artists, where expansive landscapes, figurative iterations, and abstractions have been layered within one another. This cosmic story becomes inhabited by these overlapping elements.
I could keep watching them over and over. I love them every time, even more. So you can see how, you know, there's a different feel to this, the nested world. And I love the new story that Christina put in, and my wonderful son, Jarrett Jung, did the voiceover for. And they both have, you know, very unique feeling to them. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to show you my little studio for setup here. And when I've always loved animation since I was a kid, but I always thought it was something that would be out of my reach, that it was very expensive to do and involved a lot of people, involved a lot of knowledge. So one day, PD Packard came to my studio, and if you are familiar with her work, she's an amazing printmaker who does incredible animation. And she downloaded a little app called Stop Motion Animation on my iPad for me, and said, you know, oh, you could use this. And I saw that it was made for, you know, 4-year-olds, that they could use it. So I decided, well, yeah, I could try it now. And I've been addicted ever since. So the main thing is that there are many apps online. Stop motion is free. And there are many other apps that you could use with other devices, Androids, iPhones, whatever, even computer apps that make it like accessible now to everyone. You don't have to go to school, or you don't have to, you know, have a huge investment in materials. So actually, I'll pull my setup a little closer here. And you could see my setup. I have my monotype plate here, and then I have, you know, other things that I'm working with. And right, this is the information is in the notes that for the actual names. But this is a stand tall, well, it's a portable light stand, or a iPad stand. There are many iPad stands online. You can buy something for $2, or you can spend $200. So whatever you think you can use to manipulate and hold your iPad, you can. This one I really like. This is one of my favorites. I also have another one that you can stand on the ground, but my other iPad's on there now. But you can move this up and down. You can turn it like so. And then there's another button that you can raise and lower it. And another little nifty thing that I've been using is, you don't want to touch the iPad while you're doing this, because if you do, it's going to shake and blur the image. So what I do is I use this as a remote. And this is just the headphones, the old style headphones for an iPhone. So lighting is very important. One of the biggest challenges we had going to a site unseen before was the fact that in Texas, we were in a fancy hotel, and the hotel had a chandelier, a very gaudy chandelier right above our surface. So if you're a monotype printmaker, you're going to realize that you're going to see all those glares. So we couldn't get rid of the chandelier. And as Phyllis was saying, we used that red tablecloth that we took from a table in the conference room to break down the lighting. So, and then the other problem, the challenge we had at IPCNY was we were in front of very large windows, and the lighting kept changing like every second. So it was a nightmare to edit. Each frame had a different lighting. So using natural light is nice, but it's very hard to control. So this is what I've been using now, and this is my favorite light source at this time. It's on a tripod, so you can make it high and low, and then you can move it as you need it. Up and down. And then it has a control that you can make the light warm, or you can make it cool lighting, and you can make it dim, and you can make it stronger. And sometimes you might even want to play around with changing the light to give it atmosphere in the actual animation. So this was really a nice addition to working home alone, where I can really control the lighting. Which, you know, is a problem when you're working with shiny ink, and you know, that you're going to always get those glares. But sometimes, you know, you work with what you have, and there's no right and wrong how to do it. You have to learn how to adapt and use it. Like a lot of times I'll play with shadows, or I'll play with you know, reflections. I even play with mirrors and things like that. So yeah, so I think maybe we could open up to questions, and love to chat with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan and everyone. The videos are lovely, and it's just so fascinating to hear you guys talk about it. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and for everyone watching, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to read them to Susan. So Carol Rensnick was asking about if you can define the meaning of stop motion and stop frame relating to how you did the project. So I know you talked a little bit how each one of you did your individual components, but then there's the transitions between the two. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well.
The difference between what stop frame and stop motion is that the question?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm no tech person about this kind of stuff, but I think, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody knows, but I think it means the same thing. I'm not sure. Stop motion is like what Gumby, remember Gumby? Where it started with clay, basically, and claymation is what they called it. So I've been calling it printmation. So it's the same concept as Gumby, where you, or Wallace and Gromit, where you're taking the clay and moving it. So you're taking the ink and moving it. It's the same thing. It's just a flat surface. I hope that helps.
And then can you talk, yeah, that sounds good. And then can you talk a little bit about the process of editing it so the smooth transitions between one printmakers to the next?
Well, that was why I, the only rule that I had was I asked people to leave the residue of ink on the plate, so that, and that when they cleaned up after they created their image, that the image was slowly dissolving, and that they allowed me to photograph the cleanup process. So it was a slow dissolve, basically. But there's a lot of editing in there, it's, there are, in that stop motion program, there is editing and drawing, and, it's very basic, but there are things you can do to dissolve and work on an image.
Great. So this is a question for Beth, Phyllis, and Victor. What was the most challenging part of trying to do this in 30 minutes?
Do you guys want to start, or?
Beth,
I would say for me, when I went into it, I had no idea. I watched the person before me for a couple of minutes. So I went in just being the artist I am, and went with what I could figure out in that time. So it was kind of interesting to have very little prep and just improvise. And I know if I went back again, I would approach it differently. And I loved seeing how everybody had their own way of doing it.
Well, for us, the easiest thing to do was to come prepared. We came, this is Phyllis talking. We're still looking, I don't know if you see me. We came prepared with a lot of things, so we could, pull them out if we didn't know what to do next, we had different shapes, we had different colors, we had, we could move the ink around. What do you think, Victor?
It was very interesting as we were doing it to see the animation, at least in our brains, our minds, taking shape. And as we were doing it, even though we had something in mind when we started, actually doing it kind of took over, and it was almost like an inline process that we were just doing this until it was over. It seemed to us, about, at least to me, about 5 minutes, even though it was 30 minutes. It was like, it happened so quickly.
Right.
Great. And there's questions about the 3D printing. So I know we talked a little bit about this earlier before we went live, but can you talk a little bit about converting an image over to a 3D print and the challenges?
Yes, you start with a black and white image. And the way that we process it through some 3D modeling software.
Blender.
We use Blender, but there are other ones that you can use as well. And the way that the computer views it is that the white parts of the image, or the lighter parts of the image, are processed as being higher than the darker parts of the image. So if you start with a black and white image, then the black parts would be the low parts and the white parts would be the higher parts. And then the 3D modeling software creates a file that can be used by the 3D printer to actually print out the image onto the plastic. In terms of the resolution, you're really not looking at a very high resolution image. It's not going to be anywhere near photographic quality. And what we're figuring is, if you took an image and put it in Photoshop and reduced it to about 60 DPI, the bit depth, that would be about what you could print on the 3D printer. And again, we wrote an article about it, and it's posted, and you can look for more details. If there are any other questions, if I didn't answer anything, just ask again.
I just want to say the plates are about 1 millimeter thick.
Right.
Usual, but we can alter that. Like sometimes, depending if we're doing a collaboration with somebody and they need something very deep, like for an embossment, maybe we'll do it different. We can make them different depending on what we want to do, because they're beautiful for embossments, but you might make them different than you want to ink them. We usually surface roll them. That's what we usually do with our plates.
These are very dynamic in the animation, so I can only imagine what they're like in real life.
Yeah, they're very cheap also, as opposed to a copper plate. They cost maybe $1 for a plate. So whenever people work with it, they're very experimental. People will use it and cut a hole in it and sew through it. People will use it as part, sometimes some of our prints, we actually add 3D printed elements onto the print.
Great. So Chris Onif has a question about exposure lengths of each of the stop motions. So did each of the artists get to decide how long the frames were going to be, or how the transitions were going to be, or did Susan kind of put that all together?
Well, during the actual taking of the photo, we just clicked, and I kept the camera probably at like 12 frames per second. Then when I went back to editing, I wound up changing a lot of that. And when I found in very, very interesting moments, I would maybe pause them a little bit. So there was a lot of manipulation, and I did the editing without the artists and took some, advantages.
Great. Roberta is asking, did you print on paper the matrix that everyone worked on at the end, or was it completely wiped clean?
We didn't do any printing.
I think that's the beauty of the animation, is because it's so spontaneous, right? It's kind of captures that the monotype experimental. But yeah, I love how, especially you talked about this with Nested World, about how, one artist would wipe the plate but leave it kind of still, like you said, like a ghost in the back, and then the next artist would jump on top of it. I think that's kind of leads to the beauty of the collaboration. So this is for all of you guys. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to do this for themselves?
I'll give novice advice. I'd say jump in and do it. Whether you had the right tripod or whatever you have, I would say just try taking a lot of successive shots and put it together and see what you get. And the more you do it, probably the more you're going to learn.
What about you, Phyllis and Victor?
Well, as Susan said, the software is very accessible. So I agree. There's really just start it and see what happens.
Great.
We were just lucky to work with Susan. We were so happy to just be invited, and then to work with Beth also. It really was a great experience. And seeing the other artists as we stopped by during the conference, you could stop by and see what other people were doing. And you think like, wow, I never thought of that. So it's nice when artists work together. It's something you don't see all that often.
I think printmakers are really good at collaborating. That's the one thing. And there's one more. Angela's asking, can the 3D printed plates be printed in Taglio? Because she said that you said it was surface rolled.
Yeah, I mean, we generally don't, but you can. And Susan inked some of the plates you saw in some of the earlier slides. She inked them in Taglio. So you can control the depth of the plate. So depending on what process you want to use to print it, you can make a plate that's more conducive to doing that. So yeah, you can do both.
Great, thank you. You have a lot of really great comments about people just very excited.
Can we say one other thing? We also did a viscosity print. That was another article actually in Printmaking today, but that's not online, where we work with master printer Vijay Kumar, and he took his process of viscosity printing and we're able to pretty much reproduce it with a 3D printed plate.
Great. This is a question for Beth and Susan. There's questions about what's behind you. So Susan, there's questions about the artwork behind you as well as you, Beth. You guys want to talk a little bit about your artwork?
I'll move over. Actually, this is an intaglio plate with this monotype chincolet on it, and that's a photopolymer plate, which is what I usually do for etching. And this is straight up Akua ink monotype, and then this is silk. This is archivably printed on a digital printer. These they're actually tears. They're actually images of tears. And I've cut them out. They're actually for another piece, but I was trying them out on that. So I do a lot of experimenting.
Great. And Susan, you want to talk a little bit about your work behind you?
Sure. So these are sort of like my Gumbies, because I use the, let's see. I use the prints also to make sculptural pieces. And so you could see how I would use them in combination for my own prints or my own animations. First, I make the print, then I make a sculpture with it, and then I combine them with the animation. So you could see how I incorporate them into the a three-dimensional aspect to the monotype process for animation.
So Susan, how are you going from the 2D print to the 3D sculpture?
So these are prints, and I use a lot of different papers. And let's see. And then I just build them up. I use different kinds of folds to fold the prints, make them sculptural. And then I place them down and basically do more traditional type of animation or claymation. Instead of clay, they're little paper sculptures. So I combine the monotype with three-dimensional objects in the animations that I do. And so you could see more if I have a whole table. So I keep them accessible on my table while I'm working.
They're beautiful.
Can you see?
Mhm.
I'm just kind of guessing at this. Okay.
That looks great. So we're just about at 5 o'clock. So one last question was, there's a lot of comments in the Q&A talking about the soundtrack and how amazing the soundtrack matches the print. And so can you talk a little bit about that collaboration, Susan?
Well, Ruth is a professional musician, and I'm sure she's probably listening right now. And she's amazing. And after everything is finished, we hand it over to her, and she just adds the sound and music into it. And she just is amazing. She really pays attention to each movement and the mark making, so it seems very realistic and makes interesting sounds that you can imagine the work actually coming right out of the ink. So we love Ruth. Thank you, Ruth. She's a very good friend and an amazing musician.
Great. Well, I'm going to drop the contact information for all three of you guys into the chats. So, because people have been asking how they can get a hold of you or find your artwork. But I just want to thank all of you guys for joining us tonight. Just a fascinating project, and we're hoping to collaborate. It's not official yet, but we're hoping to collaborate with you, Susan, and Phyllis and Victor, on doing a project for the Monotype Guild. So we just ask people to stay tuned for 2021. Let's hope. We'll see.
Yes.
And what other, I know you mentioned this, but what other projects do you have coming up on collaborations with the animations?
Well, I have a piece with another artist, Maddie Rosenberg, who was in the Long Journey Home in animation. She and I are working together on an animation, and hopefully we'll be at Puerto Rico at Southern Graphics Conference in 2023. I was scheduled to do 2020 or 2019. Well, anyway, whenever 2019 when COVID hit, and it was canceled. So they rescheduled for 23, and they kept me on the roster. So I hope to see everybody there, and please sign up.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you in the future at another live webinar. And there were questions. This was recorded, so we'll be posting it on our website at mgne.org soon. All right. Thanks. You have a good night.
Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.